So my interests, how I really started getting into Western Lit is for 8 years now I've been a member of my local Boy Scout troop. I go camping in the outdoors, backpacking, canoeing, just go out in the outdoors almost once a month. I really like reading. I plan on majoring in English in college. I spent 2 weeks in the backcountry in New Mexico this summer. And the picture behind is of Mount Baldy, which is a mountain that I climbed in the Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. And my favorite book is Lonesome Dove. And it's about a cattle drive that takes place from southern Texas to Montana. So at first I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really correlate the West and literature together other than Lonesome Dove, but I didn't know what to do with that. And then when I was reading a Western, Blood Meridian, I asked to myself, why is the environment in American Western literature significant? It's not only in American Western literature, it's in movies. You can't watch or read a Western without some sort of scene or description of the environment. So I decided to write a book for my project dealing with the Western environment and a Western folklore tale. I decided to write 1,000 words a day, which at times was very easy, but also very difficult. Writing, I read Stephen King's autobiography on writing, and it went over that in order to write well, one must read well, and obviously vice versa. So when I was writing, Western literature is historic fiction. So I was going back and seeing what was applicable to this time and how it was significant. And I read an interview on Cormac McCarthy, and he also did the same in Blood Meridian. In fact, he spent more time researching Blood Meridian than he actually did writing Blood Meridian. Now, the history of the West, as I learned it, I started to define it for myself through the characters of the West, which is the Native Americans were here first. They came over during the Ice Age through Russia to Alaska, and they settled down from Canada to South America. And then when Europeans started coming over, they sent mountain men west, and they sort of went out there, explored, mapped, brought back animals, plants, and sort of information to the east, which is Thomas Jefferson, Lewis and Clark's, and and then after that, around the 1830s, 1840s, settlers began moving west through the Santa Fe Trail and the most famous one, the Oregon Trail. And then as the settlers moved in, places began to emerge like Houston, Texas, San Francisco, and that was all possible due to the cowboys and miners that went out there because the land is so rich and we could utilize it for cattle, for mining, just resources. And then after the Civil War, we had the U.S. Army come in because the land was rich and wild. Native Americans were getting more and more angry with settlers, and the U.S. Army felt like they needed to deal with the issue. Now, Western Lit, some of the major themes are glory versus truth. You could read Westerns like The Virginian that have to do with the early part of the 20th century, that deal with how the West was good, what was good about it, how it's glorious, and why it should be remembered. But more contemporary American Western authors like Cormac McCarthy and Larry McMurtry deal with the truth of the West, that it was not all good, but in fact, it was very disgusting. There was a freedom of the West. You see that in like the classic iconic cowboy character, how he's roaming the plains of the Wild West all alone. He's completely free. But with that being said, there's a degree of power and freedom that has to deal with the Wild West. In order to be free, you need to have power. You need to have a gun. The idea of the hero, how he has ethical and like good morals, but he's always quiet. And the hero isn't necessarily a knight in shining armor, but just more good, more ethical than the villain. And the idea of primitivity in mankind, how mankind needs nature, how we don't depend on it, but necessarily in our everyday lives. But we need to witness it, we need to feel it. So, Lonesome Dove, my favorite book, the first Western I've read. It was written by Larry McMurtry in 1985. It won the Pulitzer Prize in '86. It's about a cattle drive from Texas to Montana in the 1880s. And I think, in my opinion, if one was to read a Western, it would be Lonesome Dove. If you could only read one Western, it would be this. It does not glorify or de-glorify the West, but sort of tells it how it is. What I really like about Lonesome Dove is the name of the town where everyone starts in. They try to get out. But at the same time, Lonesome Dove is a phrase, like, there is a lonesome dove, one is a lonesome dove, and to some degree, every character in the book is a lonesome dove. And they deal with the environment of the West in their own special way. Specifically, Dietz believes that the Native Americans can walk on the moon, and he's afraid of the moon, but at the same time, he loves it, he adores it, he thinks it's the most beautiful thing in the world. Now, here are some quotes that have to deal with Lonesome Dove. Augustus McCrae, one of the main characters, says this quote, and it sounds dark, it's sort of de-glorifying the West, but the quote under it, I'm sorry it's long, but it's sort of, it like exemplifies why the West is beautiful, and it brings the Western landscape into the pages. I'll give you some time to read that. One cannot read that without sort of having a feeling, without visualizing with themselves like what that looks like, how it's beautiful, and it's art. It's art without painting. The next book I read is The Road. It's not necessarily a classic Western with cowboys, but it is very much so a Western. It deals with issues of freedom and humanity. It's about a man and his son that's not named, and how they travel from the American West down to Mexico due to a nuclear winter and post-apocalyptia. Despite its brutal writing, it's the most dense book I ever read. It has to deal with the goodness and humanity. Some of these quotes that have to do with the landscape are these. In the landscape, there's one specific part where they encounter a waterfall, and they play in the waterfall, and they sort of enjoy themselves in the landscape, despite the landscape being brutal, and despite everyone out there essentially trying to kill them. Give you some more time to read those. Now, the Western that most impacted me, despite Lonesome Dove, was All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. It was written in 1992, and it's about two boys leaving their ranch in South Texas to go run away for whatever reason to find work to live in New Mexico in 1949. And the major theme in the novel is man versus whatever, man versus environment, man versus man, man versus system, man versus nature. It's all about conflict. The protagonist is seen through John Grady Cole, otherwise known as John Grady. The protagonist doesn't talk a lot, close with horses, and has a strong sense of morals, which is a classic example of a Western protagonist. Now here are some more quotes about the landscape and All the Pretty Horses. So as the protagonist travels south from his ranch in South Texas down to Mexico, the more primitive the land gets. People stop speaking English, obviously, but it takes place in 1949, where both horse and car shared the road, that the West was becoming less wild, less horseback, and more machine. So what I got away with reading these books, I come back to the question, why is the environment in the American West significant? The Western environment is like a palette for a painter. It's a certain craft. People write about it and express their ideas dealing with humanity, primitivity, power, freedom, ethics. It connects us to the natural world, not like how we're backpacking in nature and trees are all around us and we're away, sort of Emerson's transcendentalist eyeball. But in the comfort of our home, we experience the natural world and we feel connected to it to some way. And most importantly, the landscape of the West cannot be dominated by man. Now, here are some specifics and not so specifics. In the background, I have Devil's Tower in Wyoming, and the Rocky Mountains, Devil's Tower, yeah, we could travel around those. We could build roads through the deserts, and we could finally cross the Rocky Mountains. But we can't cut the Rocky Mountains clean off. The mesas are always going to be there, and deserts, we can't irrigate them. For example, the Grand Canyon, there are places in the Grand Canyon where men have never been, nor will ever be again. And man cannot conquer the Wild West, the West. My conclusion is Western folklore is both entertaining and meaningful. People enjoy reading Westerns. They like it, but at the same time, it deals with issues of ethics and sort of what ought to be done and what's the right thing to do. And past and present, the folklore of the West will always exist. There will always be Westerns to be made. It's like fantasy or fiction or like mystery. Like there's always an idea, an author goes, hey, that's a great idea for a Western. I want to do that. And the nature of the West, the sort of the background, it's the foundation of the Wild West and the folklore. Without nature, then the Western author, the Western genre would cease to exist because there would be essentially nothing to write about. People came to the West because it was free, because they could start anew and have power and just run away from people and start all over again. And that gave birth to folklore and the stories that came from that. And it deals with the issue of how the Native Americans believed in the balance of nature, and how we should always, to some degree, have nature in our lives, and humanity will always not crush nature, like nature will never completely crush humanity. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you did an enormous amount of reading to answer your question, and you wrote a book at the same time?
I began writing a book. I wrote like 20,000 words into it.
How did you structure your time?
I wrote about 1,000 words a day, which, depending on the day, gave me 4 to 5 hours, depending on the difficulty of the writing, whether it was this really excruciating part or whether it was something fun, something I enjoyed. And after that, I would think about ideas on my research. I took out a bunch of encyclopedias of the Wild West from both my school library and the public library, and I would read those, think about how nature has to do with the happenings of the Wild West, and how nature has to do with the happenings in the stories I was reading, like All the Pretty Horses, The Road, Lonesome Dove, and I would just write my paper from what I believed.
Did you keep a journal for your thoughts?
I did not, no. Yes?
It's obvious that Lonesome Dove really reached you.
Yes.
And you had a great line that said it was like art without painting. Could you pinpoint, can you tell us, what was it about that book that was so special?
Just the characters had, there was sort of something simplistic about it, like Hemingway, but it went deeper into that. The characters were so deep, they were so moving, they were like people, and they did people things. Reading Larry McMurtry, I also read the prequel, Dead Man's Walk, and he mastered this thing of like how plot always isn't linear, how weird things happen in life. And he makes it so not everything weird happens all at once or the plot is too normal, but he puts it in at the right time. And what I like about him, unlike any other author, is a lot of people die in Lonesome Dove just because that's the way the Wild West works. And he's not afraid to build up these characters and then kill them. In fact, it adds to the meaning and the significance of the West in the novel because good men die in the West. Yes? Yes?
So what is the future of your book project? Will you maintain it and see it through?
I intend to finish it either this summer or my freshman year in college.
And if I could follow up, have you researched any opportunities about publishing it?
I have not, no.
Is that something that you would?
I'm not sure yet, actually. I just want to finish it and then read it all at once and feel like how I feel about it. Although I edit it at the end of every week when I write it, I feel like at the end it will still need a lot of work. Yes?
Where are you going to school?
Wheaton College. It's in Northern Massachusetts.
No idea.